Coming up on This Week in Computer Hardware, Oculus Go review. Affordable VR is actually affordable. GPU prices keep dropping. Dell's XPS 15 2-in-1. We're talking Kaby Lake G and Intel's latest Optane SSD. All that and more coming up next on TWiCH.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiCH.
Bandwidth for TWiCH is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is TWiCH, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 464, recorded May 3rd, 2018. Oculus Go is go.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Home plays a big role in your life. That's why Quicken Loans created Rocket Mortgage. It lets you apply simply and understand the entire mortgage process fully so you can be confident that you're getting the right mortgage for you. Get started at rocketmortgage.com/twit.
Welcome to TWiCH, This Week in Computer Hardware, TWiCH weekly show that aims to bring you the most useful, most engaging, most delightful, most affordable, and furriest. Not that way, people. Information about computer and mobile hardware technology. We love consoles, VR, laptops, desktops, ponies. But today, ladies and gentlemen, I, Patrick Norton, and the man you will hear from momentarily, Mr. Ryan Shroud of PCPer.com, would like to say that we are delighted that GPU prices are firmly descending towards their lowest state in halfway since forever.
I can't even remember the last time I've talked about GPU prices being close to where they should be.
Not reprehensibly higher than the... Well, oh yeah, we've been talking about this forever, it seems like. And I was laughing a few months ago about how I was really upset that my GTX 1070 was $50 above MSRP, and then 2 months later it was 2x MSRP, and then somewhere around peak stupid, in December, January, it would have been close to like 2.5, 3x MSRP. But you guys have we were talking about this a couple weeks ago because I was looking for a short 1060 GTX for a build I'm working on, and the prices were like within $100 of the MSRP. And you guys just did it. You have a wonderful camel shot of PCPer.com of this graph, this charting of the value as the number gets remarkably close to where it belongs. Is that like $50-$60 above MSRP at this point?
For Vegas 64, the 869 is still high. Don't get me wrong. I think that's probably still at least $150 higher than it should be.
Okay. But you can actually buy one.
But they're in stock, and the longer they're in stock, the longer they're going to take. And that screenshot was from 3 days ago. So, your mileage is going to vary. It could have doubled. Bitcoin's on its way back up. It's almost to $10,000. So to hell with everything. And move on.
You're not nihilistic at all.
I try my best. I would like to think that this is a significant shift, right? Like even if Bitcoin slowly creeps its way back up, as long as we don't see it and the altcoins that people actually mine suddenly have this big spike, that things will be more calm, even if there is shifts one way or the other. I don't think you'll see quite as many people running out to buy all 30 of the GTX 1080 Ti's that exist at Micro Center for the foreseeable future, I guess, which is good. Right,
but there actually will be GPUs on the shelves at Micro Center should you go there,
right? Or
Fry's Electronics, or whatever your favorite place is, Best Buy. But I mean, I was looking at you go to the GTX 1060 webpage at Nvidia.com, and it's like $299. That's what they list as the price on the NVIDIA webpage. And you can get a 6 GB EVGA GTX 1060 card for $320 right now. That's pretty huge compared to where those prices were. Because I thought I was going to force myself to do this build a month ago, and I swear to God, this price was like $570 for the same GPU.
I believe you.
It's
nuts.
Nuts, but oddly enough, nuts in a good way. Maybe not so much for NVIDIA and AMD, but for consumers and gamers, it's a big deal.
Yeah, and again, I still don't know how much AMD and NVIDIA benefited from this in terms of per unit sales. They were definitely benefiting from selling everything that they could make, but I do believe that it's still in the best interest of both of these companies for them to sell graphics cards to gamers that have brand loyalty, recurring purchasing, but all of these guys want to launch new products at some point, and launching new products in the middle of the hysteria is incredibly problematic, as AMD found with the Vega 64, Vega 56 launches,
which was available for several minutes before it sold out.
Right. And they tried a couple of things. You can debate how hard they tried, how interested they were in actually getting stuff to the gamers, and even more recently, AMD built these things called battle boxes. I don't know if you saw these, which were bundles of a B250 motherboard, a Ryzen 1600 or 1700 processor, and an RX 580. They're selling them as a bundle that you would buy through Newegg or Amazon at reasonably close to MSRP pricing. Now, AMD had a double desire for this, right? Because not only could they make some people happy by getting graphics cards in their hand at reasonable prices, but this allowed them to try to push the sales of B250 motherboards and older first-gen Ryzen processors that are now going to be harder to sell as the Ryzen 2000 series comes through. So it doesn't make, there's still awesome parts, but that was part of the deal. So, but the fact that they even had the flexibility to do that they had partners willing to sell their RX 580s in this bundle as part of this battle box deal indicates that, MSI or whoever the partner wasn't getting offered 75% more if they happened to sell it to the mining groups instead.
There you have it. Go Gadget Oculus Go, the Cord Cutters VR headset. I'm torn between being really excited because there's another VR headset release coming in the near future that I can't really talk about, but I thought this was interesting. You're looking at the intern at the Verge offices as they were trying to figure out how to do battery testing on this, but we're looking at, this is a self-contained Snapdragon, I want to say 821 powered VR display. Think 2016 flagship phone in terms of the specs, except obviously with a radically different screen experience. I gotta say, my big disappointment of that is essentially this is a much better Daydream experience than cardboard or strapping your phone into a Daydream. It's a huge improvement, but you don't have access to the Oculus games, which makes it kind of fall apart for me. You don't have access to the Oculus PC games necessarily, right? But you do have access to the Oculus Store, which essentially has anything that Google Daydream would have plus a little bit extra, right? It's a nice headset. By all accounts, it's comfortable.
It's a nice headset. The hardware is not what you would find in a modern smartphone, but there's a couple of things that they do right. One is it's really cheap, right? This is $199 for the 32 gig model, $249 for the 64 gig model, which is, how much was a Gear VR when they're new? $100, $150, and that was for just the shell. But then you had to buy a $600 to $800 phone to put in it. So in terms of like lowering total cost for cell phone class VR, this is doing an excellent job of doing that. Also, this has a different kind of screen in it. What's that? Yeah, it does have speakers built in.
I'm sorry.
Like on the edge.
You should talk about the screen, because that's much more important than my obsession with the speaker implementation on that.
Okay, I will back you up on the speaker implementation shortly. But the screen is interesting in that it's an LCD screen. It's not an OLED screen. And so the downside to that is that the blacks aren't as deep, they aren't as dark. The contrast ratio isn't as wide as you would see like on a Galaxy S9 that's put into a Gear VR or something like that.
Costs 4 times as much.
Correct. But I'm here to tell you that I actually prefer the screen on this than I have with any other slot-in VR system. It is the screen door effect on this is incredibly minimal. These are 2560 by 1440 per eye displays, right? But this because of kind of the reduction in contrast, the screen door effect is almost gone. You can read text in this thing. I watched, I did the Plex VR deal where I watched 2 episodes of a TV show while sitting on my couch in front of my big TV. So it didn't make a whole lot of sense, but just for testing it out. And it was really pretty positive. Like I didn't feel like my eyes were getting strained or that I worried about any of those ill effects of poor screen implementation. So I came away and even though it's a 72 hertz peak refresh screen, it apparently either operates at 60 hertz or 72, not in anything in between. So it's less than the 90 that we've seen on other VR headsets. So that's could be concerning. In the things that I have done and watched, it hasn't really been that big of a problem. I haven't played a whole lot of games yet, but I did some like 3D experiences stuff, like a Star Wars thing where you're in a 360 environment and you can wander around, or not really wander around, but look around. I think the screen is really impressive. It's got fairly low persistence for an LCD, even compared to OLEDs. So that's a positive. You mentioned the speakers. So it sounds stupid that we would be that impressed with there being speakers on this, because there is a headphone jack, which is good. You want that in case you're trying to be actually totally immersed or you don't want to bother people around you. But they've implemented speakers kind of on the edges of the device here, a left and a right. And as a result, you don't have to put on headphones to use this if you're not doing anything that would require it, right? If you're just watching a video, if you're interacting with a game and that's already in kind of a quiet environment, it actually works really well. And I preferred it at my house because I wasn't completely cut off from the outside world. If somebody was walking around behind me or whatever in front of me, I could hear them. I had the TV on because there was an NBA basketball game, and while I was interacting and messing with stuff and testing it, I could listen for what the score was, whatever, if I wanted to take off the headset and watch that instead. So I think it's a novel addition that actually makes it a significantly more useful product as a quick hit device. Put it on for 20 minutes, take it off. As opposed to, where are my headphones? Oh, I've got the Lightning ones with me, but these don't work on this. Now I got to find the adapter or whatever it would be. Sure. Although you still have that option if you want to use it on like a noisy plane or something like that, or you're trying to block out your family, whatever.
There's a headphone jack.
Yeah. The speakers don't get exceptionally loud, I will say, at max volume, but again, it does come with a kind of a controller, like 3DoF, 3 degrees of freedom controller, just like Daydream does. Right. Same thing as the headset. It is 3DoF. So that essentially means that it can measure movement in 3 dimensions, but not in 6. The 6DoF is the other kind of big one. That's like if you take a step forward or backward, does it track that? And this device doesn't do that. And I will say, it's been a while since I've used a VR system that wasn't externally tracked or had 6DoF capability. So the fact that when I was in that the Star Wars kind of VR experience that I downloaded, when I leaned forward a little bit, purposefully leaned forward a little bit, and the environment doesn't negotiate that. It doesn't indicate that I've done that. It is still off-putting, right? And it's still kind of like, okay, I could see how people might not like this. They recommend you sit down when you use this, because that will greatly prevent those types of things from happening, from you leaning forward, stepping forward, et cetera. And there's also no capability. There's no what do you call it? The system where it shows grids around the area, right? So you don't walk into something or run into something. None of that exists.
We should point out, so for those of you who are not particularly familiar with VR vernacular, 3 degrees of freedom essentially means forward and back, up and down, and then left and right. And then when you get into pitch, yaw, and roll, that's the 6 degrees of freedom. I mean, what happens when you sort of like, look up like this or like that, or what can you look, can you comfortably look around like this inside of there, or to think, okay.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
when
you don't have to be
like,
perfectly rigid. You don't have to be perfectly rigid, but it's like if you look down, that's fine. If I look down and then want to lean down or crouch down to touch something, it doesn't know that, right? It's not capable of measuring that. So, and in many ways, that's how all of the slot-in phone versions of VR have worked since the beginning, and this is still a push for that. So it's not a revolutionary thing, but again, for $199, you can buy them at Best Buy. It does some things. It's like I said, I wore it for about an hour and 45 minutes straight, which is more than I've worn a VR headset in a long time. And I didn't have any discomfort either from eye fatigue or nausea or like it just fitting poorly. It all seems to work pretty well. Do I think that this changes the landscape of VR immediately? Probably not, but it's the right move, I think these untethered headsets still have the most potential. You're going to have a very different experience, obviously, because you're gaming on a Snapdragon 821 device as opposed to a GTX 1080 Ti. So keep that in mind. But so far, I like it. And I went out to Best Buy whenever they launched, Tuesday, I guess it was, Monday, Tuesday, and picked it up. It is built by Xiaomi, which is kind of interesting. But it's a neat product. It's better than I expected to be for $199. I thought we were going to see the beginning of the end of VR and kind of this pessimistic view, but the image quality is good. The little accents like adding speakers to it is really good. Comfort is good. Yeah, I've been impressed.
And we should point out, when you've been talking about a VR experience, for most of the last couple of years, it's either been an expensive desktop PC and an expensive piece of hardware. And then, of course, the hardware dropped down to like $400 in the case of the Oculus Rift. And then the price finally came down on the Vive. And then you have a physical cable tethering you to that desktop, or you were doing the smartphone stuff, which is really kind of a fascinating taster, but I think more often than not was fairly frustrating in terms of the experience, especially in the cases where you were like, I'm going to tap on the side of this plastic thing I've strapped to my face because that's the only way I can control it. To you've got like the Oculus Go, I want to say the Mirage Solo, Lenovo's Mirage Solo with Daydream, which has the WorldSense technology, so you can lean and duck and move inside of things. That's gonna, those are pre-ordered for like $400. One thing I want to ask you, because I'm circling picking up one of the Oculus Go's to do a review of it, 32 gigs or 64 gigs? Because by nature, I always want to get more memory, but do the apps for that take up much space?
I would say yes, right? So one of the other demos so you download this Disney demo and it has a bunch of options in Marvel or Disney or Star Wars, like little experiences you can do. Some of them are interactive, most of them are not. And they give you the option of streaming or downloading, right? And the streaming is lower resolution. You might get some frame stutters, which is obviously a bad idea in VR. So I was always downloading everything, and each of these was about 1 gig to 2 gigs a piece. I downloaded a Jurassic World thing, which was a small experience where you followed around a velociraptor as it kind of interacted with some other dinosaurs. And the download wasn't working on it, but it was like a 3 gig, 4 gig download. So I do think probably the higher capacity is better, because remember, you're getting 32 gigs minus whatever the operating system is. I haven't figured out a way to look into it and see exactly what that is. I will note that, for example, that tried to do the streaming of the Jurassic World event thing, and they must have been having some capacity issues, because it was hard stuttering quite a bit. It was unnerving for me to look at this dinosaur up close and suddenly have the dinosaur itself start macro blocking, because the bandwidth was low, and then it would kind of go more into focus and then out of focus. It was very it took you out of the experience pretty dramatically. So I would count on downloading everything, so you're going to use a lot of space, but I can't say for sure. My guess is that you would just, for $50, buy the 64 gig model. $50 for 32 gigs of storage is kind of a bad deal, I guess. But if you separate them by anything less than that, nobody would buy the smaller one. And I think they desperately wanted to get to that $199 price tag. So
interesting. Oh my goodness. Sorry, I was like rolling through the Daydream site and thinking about applications, because really, these are all about the applications. There's only so many times you can throw a snowball at a kid, as much fun as that might be. Intel's Optane SSD 905P, 960 gigabyte NVMe HHHL SSD review, or in short, Alan writes, bigger cross point. What's the 10,000 foot view on the latest Optane SSDs?
So the 905 is interesting in that it is mostly unchanged from the 900P. The 905P has LED lights, as you can see, so it kind of is targeting a different market than the workstation consumer, I guess. It is almost the same performance. The 905P is a little bit better, although to be fair, we don't exactly know how or why it is. Alan is guessing that the controller. Yeah, it's always the LEDs. Alan is guessing that the controller is clocked a little bit higher. Right. Just maybe a little bit faster to do that, because the controller is the bottleneck in a lot of these use cases. Probably the most interesting addition for the 905P, other than the cool lights, is that it's now available in a 960 gig capacity. Prior to this, you could only get up to 480 on the add-in card and 280 on the U.2. With the 905P, they've now bumped both of those up. So now you can get 960 on the add-in card and 480 on the U.2 configuration. Nice. So you get some capacity bumps there. The significant drawback in my mind is that the pricing isn't better, right? The cost per gig is actually higher with the 905P 960 gig than the 900P 480 gig.
And we're talking a $135 gigabyte for a 960 gigabyte drive. It's $1,300. The 900P 480 gigabytes is running $600, or about $1.25 per gigabyte, although it's on sale for a much more attractive $1.15 a gigabyte at Amazon for $550. But I mean, this is you're a player if you're buying one of these. It's the best random performance Alan's seen to date. Improves sequential performance, albeit modest. A very modest improvement over the 900P. 10 drive writes per day endurance, as in go ahead, edit video on this thing all day long. You're not going to kill it. If you can get over the price, which is non-trivial, but for most people, despite the LED, for professional users who don't care about the LED lighting, it's a tool that they're going to write off. And for everybody else, gamers who want a ridiculously overperforming hard drive for loading game levels, they've got LED lighting, so it'll match the rest of your battle station.
Yeah, not wrong. I mean, that's pretty much what it comes down to. I would on the price per gigabyte. When I first started this discussion yesterday, the day before, I was aggravated because, hey, the cost per gig should go down as the capacity increases because the component level doesn't change. However, if you look back at both SATA and NVMe SSDs, the highest end capacities of those tended to be higher cost per gig. Like the 4 terabyte version of the 860 Evo, for example, was more in cost per gig than the 1 terabyte when it first came out. So it's not unheard of for this to be the case. And they couldn't price it less than the 900P because it is the 905P, so it's a higher number. So it's insinuating that it's a little bit better by a small margin, which it is. If you look at the performance data, it is slightly faster than the 900P in most instances. Not enough to warrant, significant upgrade path modification, but enough to warrant, let's see, whatever 5 out of 900 is percentage-wise model number increase, I would say.
Right. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We should take a moment to thank our sponsor. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware brought to you by Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. The mortgage experience traditionally just painful. If you've ever applied for a mortgage, it's like being turned inside out slowly with lots of opportunities to make mistakes and be frustrating. It was dated, you know, it was all about them, not you. And Quicken Loans created Rocket Mortgage because it was time for the focus to be on making your life easier and taking advantage of this thing we like to call technology to make the financing experience a little less traumatic. And the idea, it's simple, right? Rocket Mortgage gives you the confidence you need when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. It's simple. They want you to fully understand all the details, be confident you're getting the right mortgage for you. It's convenient. They're trusted partners. You can literally share your financial information with Rocket Mortgage at the touch of a button. This is Quicken, people. You trust them, right? It's powerful. Doesn't matter if it's your first home or your 10th. Rocket Mortgage can perform thousands of calculations in seconds. They do the math instantaneously. So you can have the smartest information, the most useful information, so you can make the smartest decision right in front of you. Based on your income, your assets, your credit, Rocket Mortgage can analyze all of the home loan options for which you qualify and find the one that's just right for you. Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Apply simply, understand fully, mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/twit. That's rocketmortgage.com/twit. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030. And we thank Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans for their support of TWiCH and This Week in Computer Hardware. Oh, so it's getting safer to buy a GPU. VR is getting incredibly affordable. We've got the fastest SSD ever. And we're saying goodbye to Kaby Lake X CPUs. Is this a big deal, or is this just kind of like a blip in Intel's roadmap?
I think in terms of importance, it's definitely just a blip. This was a part that when it launched, people were very confused about why Intel would create it. If you remember, it came out with the X299 platform, the Skylake X platform that had, processors 10, 12, eventually up to 18 core designs. The Kaby Lake X was basically the Kaby Lake processor, the 7700K, moved up to this new platform. You didn't get any, it still was 2-channel memory. It still had 16 PCI Express lanes. It ran at 100 megahertz clock speed higher than the 7700K on the Z270 platform. Intel kind of said, this was the ultimate gamers platform in that it was the highest clock speed individual clocks, or highest single threaded clock speed part that Intel offered at the time. You could get the kind of the more higher end X299 motherboards for your platform if you wanted to. The problem was that a lot of the features, if you used a Kaby Lake X processor on X299 motherboards, you had to disable some of the features and capabilities because you didn't have enough PCI Express slots for them to work. And for the motherboard vendors, it was a huge pain in the neck because they now had to have like qualification lists for what devices worked depending on what processors you had, even more so than they did already, right? Because if you remember the 10-core variant of Skylake X, the 7900X, had 40 lanes, and the one below that has, 26, 28? I can't remember exactly. So there was already a division, and now there was a third division below that where Kaby Lake X only used 16 lanes of PCI Express. So it made things very complicated. It launched, when did it launch again? It was last July, I think. I think I put that in the story, but June 19th, 2017. So these things lasted less than a year before EOL, which is a very short time span for an Intel processor. I would say two things about it. One, its release at all and its kind of promotion indicated at the time, especially hindsight here, that Intel's product team didn't really know what they were trying to do. They didn't know how to compete with Ryzen and with Threadripper and all these things that AMD was doing to kind of shake up the enthusiast and the DIY market. And I don't think this was well thought out. I don't think they, took this to the demographic and asked if this was something they wanted. They just decided, hey, this is something we can do relatively easily in terms of packaging and distribution, so we'll do it. That being said, the fact that they're EOLing it now is a sign that they understand better. They're not still trying to push this on anybody. It would be impossible for these to sell, right? With the 8700K out there running at higher speeds than the 7740 and the 7740 and 7640X Skylake X parts, there was nobody that would buy these processors. Right. If you're buying that platform, you want more threads, you want more multi-threaded capability and performance. So you would buy something better than that, 8 core, 10 core, 18 core. So, you got to order them by November 30th, 2018. Otherwise, you're out of luck. And my guess will be that there won't be a whole lot of people in line, OEMs or consumers themselves, trying to do that, other than some companies that sold them that want to have warranty replacement parts on lockdown, should that ever become an issue. But it was kind of an odd product, and now it has an odd history and an odd timeline as well.
Speaking of odd products and Kaby Lake, let's talk about Kaby Lake G. We over on TechThing this week, you got Dell's XPS 15 2-in-1. Shannon ordered that in, because Shannon's always looking for better ways to edit video on the road. And it's pretty much what you expect. Dell was sampling the top of the line 4K monitor version. This is a product with a huge price spread as you look at these, right? So it's a 15-inch, it's 2-in-1. You flip the thing over, it's a tablet. You can use it in tent mode, which is what you're looking at right there on that picture on the middle of the Dell webpage. Entry level, this is a Core i5 83.5G with 8 gigabytes of DDR4 and a minuscule 128 gigabytes SATA drive, SATA SSD drive. $1,500 bumps you up to a 256 gigabyte drive. $1,700 gets you a Core i7 processor and still has you at 8 gigabytes of RAM and a 256 gigabyte drive. And then when you go to the top of the line, you start spending a fair amount of coin. Core i7, 16 gigs of RAM, a 256 gigabyte drive is $2,200 with the 4K. With the 4K monitor on that one. I should say that it's something to think about when you're looking at these. The first of all is yes, the Radeon RX Vega MGL graphics with 4 gigabytes of memory is a huge bump over anything that's going to be integrated in in any other integrated Intel graphics, right? Because you have these two chips on the Intel die. You are not going to be gaming at 4K on that processor. I mean, you can launch a game. It will play several frames. It will, it may even play them in a way that you can kind of pretend you're playing a game, but in reality, you're going to be gaming at 1080p. It's a 1050. We talked about that earlier. This is not a particularly, it's unfortunate. We're very curious to see what the performance of the 1080p Dell XPS 15 2-in-1s, because the 4K display, or the model with the 4K display, is delivering about 6 hours of battery life, which is pretty meh by the standards of most labs. I mean, I'm looking at a Dell XPS in front of me that I think you typically get 12 hours out of. So for there to be a 6-hour battery life on a laptop, it's kind of like, oh, I remember those days. Remember the gaming laptops with 90 minutes of battery life? This is obviously better than that, but the memory on these is soldered down on the motherboard. So if you or is integrated. So if you need more than 8 gigabytes of RAM, shop carefully. But typical fit and finish, high quality, good feel to it. A little over 4 pounds in weight, which is either perfectly reasonable for a 15-inch system or irritating as snot to you. Make your call. You can go on most of the models for an extra $100. You can go from 8 gigabytes to 16 gigabytes, and you will be able to replace the SSD drive at home by removing the back panel. You will not, however, be able to, as far as my understanding is, you will not be able to upgrade the memory on this once you once you order. But overall, pretty impressive. Seems to be a slightly different. Oh, by the way, that's a 75 watt hour battery on that 4K that was delivering 6 hours of battery life. So maybe the GPU is absorbing a lot of power, but I feel like that 4K monitor may be sucking down a fair amount of juice.
Yeah, they do that. That's true. I have yet to get my hands on one of these, and I've asked many times for it. I still feel like this would also be one of my favorite solutions for mobile productivity on the go, right? Because I'm not just doing Word documents sometimes, but yes, like in terms of mobile video editing, mobile photo editing,
it's got some
and maybe mobile gaming if you've got some free time. Yeah. I'm still confused. I still don't really understand why Dell isn't marketing this as a gaming device. Why they don't have an Alienware version of this? Why they don't have some moderate gaming variant?
It's funny because something I found out from one of the Tech Thing viewers was like, "Hey, that 27-inch Dell Ultrathin S monitor you reviewed last week, that's a FreeSync monitor." And I was like, what? And it turns out it does actually support FreeSync. And it will bump up the refresh rate to 75 hertz up from the standard 60 hertz if you have a compatible GPU and go into that mode. But I just remember being like, I was like, Dell, and they're like, yeah, it's a FreeSync monitor. We're just not promoting it as a gaming monitor. And I wonder if this is one of those situations where they're looking, at people that are rocking the spreadsheets or dealing with Photoshop more so than as a gaming tool, or perhaps every Kaby Lake G powered system they sell is one less gaming system with a discrete graphics system that may or may not generate more profit. I mean, I'm trying to come up with some ideas here.
Yeah,
but
I don't know. I got nothing. I got nothing except that it's odd. It's odd because this is what part of the presentation that that Intel had with this part launched was, hey, we're going to take care of day zero drivers, and we're going to work with Radeon brand so that we always have the most up-to-date versions of drivers for gaming. And there's been this machine, the Dell XPS 15 2-in-1. There's been the HP Spectre and the Nook that Intel built. And they kind of marketed the Nook for mainstream gaming, and we tested it on that because we have one of those in.
Right.
But there just hasn't been any build up to this, and it's starting to be a little bit worrisome.
Do you think it's because is it parts availability? You think Intel's not promoting the part?
I don't know. I would imagine parts availability could possibly be it, right? Because if graphics card availability in general is limited by memory, this uses HBM2, so yes, there's a chance that's what it is. There's a chance that maybe the integration of the GPU and the CPU on the same substrate through the EMIB is more complicated and has a lower yield than we thought. There's also the potential that other players like Nvidia just don't want this to happen, and so they're pushing back. They want their GTX 1050s and 1050 Ti's and 1060s to be where all that stays. So there's a whole lot of questions and not a lot of answers. But at the very least, I want to get one of these in so I can make an assertion about whether or not it should be listed as a gaming as a mainstream gaming platform at least.
I will say at 1080p gaming, it's not bad. It's kind of fun. You pretty much have to go up to the $1,700 tier on this if you want to go to 16 gigabytes, in which case it will now be an $1,800 laptop. And then the 4K display, if you go the 4K over the 1080p display, it's another $400 over that. It ends up being about, if you turn on all the options, it ends up being about $2,200 or $2,300. Well, let's say $2,350 with a half a terabyte SSD. But you're looking at $1,800 if you want 16 gigs of memory, 256 gig SSD, and a standard 1920 by 1080 anti-reflective touch display. And I like the idea of anti-reflective. It always makes me happy.
I agree.
But it's an interesting laptop. Another thing we were talking about tech thing this week. I was looking at NAS drive prices, and we had a viewer question about that. And I looked at the Western Digital Reds, and a 1 terabyte Red is 16 cents a gigabyte. A 3 terabyte Red is 26 cents a gigabyte. A 4 terabyte Red, pretty much up through a 10 terabyte Red, is 32 cents a gigabyte. And I thought it was really funny because, you go from 26 cents a gigabyte to 32 cents a gigabyte, which is a huge percentage increase between the 3 terabyte and 4 terabyte drive. But the other way of looking at that is you get 33% more storage for an extra $10 when you go from the 3 terabyte drive to the 4 terabyte drive. The other thing it kind of had difficulty because math was realizing that, literally the $318 10 terabyte drive is 31 cents a gigabyte or 31.4 cents a gigabyte. And pretty much everything else is between 4 terabytes and 10 terabytes is sitting right there at 32 cents a gigabyte. So technically the sweet spot, I guess, would be that 1 terabyte $62 Red, but I don't want any more 1 terabyte drives in my life anywhere except in my laptops or on SSDs. But think about the cost of that Optane drive versus the 32 cents a gigabyte for most of the other standard rotating media drives.
It's true. It's true. I think we had the discussion on here. Maybe we didn't. We were buying some drives for a NAS here, and we bought 12 terabyte drives, and the idea of spending $2,200 on hard drives. Yeah, it seemed crazy to me, even though individually and cost per gig, it all made perfect sense. To me, the idea that hard drives in any configuration would be expensive was kind of mind-numbing, but I've moved past that.
Well, when you buy enough of anything, it gets expensive.
Yes. Like, logically, I understand it, but emotionally, it hurt, right? Like, it was like, $3,000 on hard drives. Oof, man. Oh, okay. All right.
Well, you only have to do it once for several years, then you do it again. The number of good game streamers is Ryzen. That just made me laugh. That was kind of the summary statement. I think Joshua put up on PC Per. But I think we can kind of. They went, Jeff Campman over at Tech Report, they got kind of deep on looking at Ryzen, or as they put it, we've taken some extra time to bench each Intel and AMD chip in our test suite with stock RAM as well as overclock speeds. The wealth of resulting data has taken more time to crunch than I would have liked, but hey, we've got it. And if you want to get some more benchmark, some more deets on the benchmarks of what's going on in terms of a whole lot of pretty crazy benchmarking data. In terms of the best high refresh rate gaming chip on the planet, the Core i7 8700K is still on top. But boy, there's a lot of good stuff going on in terms of those Ryzen parts, especially that Ryzen 7 2700X. Goodness.
Yeah. I will say when they look through the gaming plus streaming stuff, they have two very different results. Like the Far Cry results favor the 8700K pretty handily, which I thought would actually go. It goes against what the common knowledge that AMD has been trying to talk through, right? Mm-hmm. Is that the more core counts, the higher core and thread count of these Ryzen parts would make a significant difference. I do wish there had maybe been like a 4-core Intel part in here for a comparison as well. Right. But then the next page shows streaming Deus Ex with OBS as well, but they don't have any of the Intel results here. So it's only 2700X versus 1800X, but it is a pretty dramatic improvement going from the 1800X to that 2700X. And I do think a lot of this has to do with Precision Boost 2, not that, there's some frequency there too, just peak frequency improvements. But if you look at Precision Boost 2 being able to increase your effective clock rate when you're not running all 8 cores fully loaded, then that's where you see some of that advantage, or more some more significant portion of that advantage. So it's clearly worked out. So yeah, a good round of testing.
So we like the testing; it makes us happy, and I had to include this because. I want to point out what seems to be an inaccuracy in a PC Per title. 7 brown new fans from Noctua. And I'd like to point out there appears to be a gray fan in the lineup if you go to Noctua's website.
Okay. All right.
I just want to point that out. And it was shocking to me to see something that was not, the colors of the desert.
Not brown on brown. Yeah.
It keeps there. It is. The NF-P12 Redux. I like saying Redux instead of Redo. But that looks awfully gray to me. Maybe it's a typo or an early image, but I don't remember ever seeing anything that looked like that.
It's just a very desaturated brown.
I was going to say it was color. Yeah, it was that somebody screwed up the Photoshop, and it wasn't actually supposed to be a different color than brown and brown.
Oh my goodness. But
honestly, it wouldn't be. Honestly, that would. That could be the case. Clearly not. But hey, more designs.
I like reading the marketing information on in the PR document is great because the new NF A12x25 is the first fan made of Noctua's novel Sterox LCP material and integrates the company's latest innovations in aerodynamic engineering in order to achieve an unprecedented level of quiet cooling performance. And then what is cool is thank you. There's certain press releases that I can just hear. In a world gone mad, desperate for superior cooling performance. But I just love the fact that the NF-P12, which is a fantastic fan. They're doing a more affordable version of that. I'm as much as I may read it in the goofy movie announcer voice. As somebody who's been around since the early days of PCs, aerodynamic engineering and paying attention to how the fans interact with, the stuff we breathe, has done pretty spectacular things in terms of making PCs quieter. And I'm kind of curious to see what the real world performance on these is like. I mean, they're Noctua fans. I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. It's I like good fans. I don't know how to explain that, but
they are well understood to make some of the best, and they were chastised by most very frequently about the colors that they use on those. But now it has just become a thing in the enthusiast market, and I think it would be silly of them to move away from it. Yes, you can offer some other ones and some different colors or whatever for people who want to specifically color coordinate in their machines. Right. But I think having that, if I were Noctua, I would be defending not patent, but more of a copyright. Right. If somebody else was trying to rip that off, because now that's your thing. Now that's how and now you see those colors and you kind of generally assume that you're looking at a pretty high quality device. So.
Absolutely. I mean, this is like $30 for the NFA 12x25. The NF-P12 Redux is like $13.90, which is pretty reasonable. And you're talking about with those NF-P12s, you can throttle those down to 900 RPM, which translates into 12.6 decibels A-weighted, which is really, really quiet if you don't need an excessive amount of cooling to vent your case. So,
right. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. More VR news coming up in the next couple of days that we'll talk about next week. Anything you can tease that you guys are working on over at PC Per?
I'm going to have more thoughts on the Oculus Go specifically. We'll have a review posted maybe later today of a large format e-ink reader that also has an HDMI input. If you wanted to use it as a monitor, think about it.
I've okay. I've thought about it. Yes.
Okay. Now you can stop thinking about it because we can talk about it next week. Other than that, let's see what we got. We got some other Corsair coolers in as well, and some other stuff to jump down that way. So, how about you?
We're doing a bit of a Mother's Day special next week. Shannon has a fantastic, sophisticated, kind of high end, but not atrociously high end digital picture frame. Remember digital picture frames?
I do, yeah.
They're still a thing. Some of them are better than others. And I also talk about collage software for your phone. Should you have a somewhat more restricted budget, but access to a color printer as you reel towards Mother's Day with panic in your heart and mind. So something to think about there from the people at Tech Thing. With that, ladies and gentlemen, since I am and have been all day long full of the weird, I think I finally managed to get so peculiar during AVXL. Robert Heron looked at me with actual panic in his eyes, which usually only happens when we're about to be run over by a train. Story there that I won't get into, but oh my goodness. PC Per, ladies and gentlemen. PCPer.com is the place you can find Mr. Ryan Shrout, Alan Malventano, and the rest of the PC Per crew doing some of the best hardware reviews anywhere in the known and unknown universe. You can find me over at tekthiing.com, techthing.com. There, look, it's the 15 2-in-1 with a plant. I like the colors. I like green. Green makes me happy. And you can find us also at, you can find me and Robert Heron over at AVXL. If you're curious about home theater and audio, or if you're looking for a good deal on a television, there are some reasonably acceptable 75-inch flat panels, should you not be looking for the ultimate in color, that sell for like $1,300. Just want to lay that out there. I still prefer projectors. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, twit.tv/TWiCH is the place to find all the information on subscribing and all of our older shows and all the different formats of the audio and video. And that about sums it up. I am apparently now collapsing from lack of sustenance, and I'm going to say thank you to each and every one of you out there listening in the audience. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll see you next week on Twitch.